No rescue was coming. Nobody expected a human dangerous warship to emerge from the void. The station called Kesh Reach floated at the very edge of known space, far from the bright core worlds where the great alliances ruled. It was a small place, built by the Voss Concord many years ago as a trading post and a listening station. From here, sensors watched the black emptiness beyond the last charted stars. That emptiness had a name among the Concord's many species. They called it the Void. No ship had ever returned from deep inside it with useful information. Most ships that went too far simply stopped answering their radios. The Void was a wall, and nobody on Kesh Reach thought much about what might live behind that wall. Administrator Sella Vorn had commanded Kesh Reach for 6 years. She was Kelvin, a species with pale blue skin and 4 eyes set in 2 pairs, 1 pair for close work and 1 for distance. She was proud of her station. It was not large, only 800 people living and working inside its metal ribs, but it was steady and quiet was good in a region of space this far from help. Sella liked quiet. She had chosen this posting because of it. That peace ended on a morning when the alarms did not stop ringing. "Report," Sella said, walking fast onto the command deck. Her 4 eyes moved across the screens, trying to take in everything at once. "Ships, Administrator," said Tomo, her sensor officer, a small furred Denari with quick fingers. "Many ships. They came out of nowhere, out of the dark side of the system. Skarn markings." Sella felt her stomach drop. The Skarn Dominion was not a nation like the Concord. It did not build or trade or grow. It took. Skarn ships raided colonies, stripped them of resources and people, and moved on. Nobody negotiated with the Skarn. Nobody who tried lived to try again. "How many?" she asked. 12 warships, maybe more behind them. Sensors are not clear yet. 12 warships against a trading station, with no military of its own. Kesh Reach had 2 patrol boats, small and old, meant for chasing off pirates too weak to be a real threat. They were nothing against 12 Skarn warships. "Send the distress call," Sella said. "All channels. Tell the Concord we need help now." Tomo's fingers moved across his console. A minute passed, then 2. "Administrator," he said, his voice smaller now. The distress call went out. "But the nearest Concord fleet is 11 days away at full burn. The Skarn ships will be here in 6 hours." The room went very quiet. Everyone on the command deck understood what that meant. No rescue was coming. Not in time. Not before the Skarn ships arrived and did whatever they planned to do to Kesh Reach and the 800 people who lived there. Sella made herself breathe. Panic would not help anyone. "Then we prepare as best we can," she said. "Seal the outer sections. Move everyone toward the core. If we cannot fight them off, maybe we can survive long enough for something to change." She did not believe her own words, but she said them anyway, because a leader who gave up out loud gave her people nothing to hold on to. 6 hours passed like 6 minutes. The Skarn ships grew from tiny dots on the sensor screens into shapes that could be seen with the naked eye through the station's viewports. Long, dark, spiked vessels built for war and nothing else. They did not send any message. They did not ask Kesh Reach to surrender. Skarn ships never did. They simply came closer, weapons already glowing with charge. Sella stood on the command deck with her 4 eyes fixed on the main screen. Around her, the crew worked in tense silence, running the last checks on the station's weak defense grid, a handful of point defense guns meant for debris and small pirate craft, not warships. "They are entering weapons range," Tomo said. "Brace the station," Sella ordered. "All hands to shelter positions." The first shots came a moment later. Kesh Reach shuddered as Skarn cannon fire struck its outer hull. Alarms screamed through every corridor. Sella held onto her console as the deck shook beneath her feet. "Outer ring breached," someone shouted. "Hull integrity at 60% and falling." "Return fire," Sella said, though she knew the station's guns could do almost nothing against warships built for real battle. The exchange went on for what felt like hours, but was only minutes. Kesh Reach's small defense grid managed to damage 1 Skarn fighter craft that came too close, a tiny victory that meant nothing against 12 warships. The station's shields, never designed for combat, buckled and failed within the first quarter hour. After that, every hit landed directly on the hull. Administrator, we cannot hold, Tomo said, his voice shaking now. At this rate, the outer sections will lose atmosphere within the hour. Sela looked at the screen showing the Skarn fleet, patient and merciless, closing the distance meter by meter, section by section, chewing through her station's defenses. She thought of the people sheltering in the core, families who had come here for a quiet posting on the edge of nowhere, never expecting war to find them. Keep firing, she said. Keep firing as long as we can. Far beyond the edge of the system, in the region that Kesh reaches sensors labeled only as the Void, something was moving. It had been moving for some time, quiet and unseen, its systems dark to avoid drawing attention. It was not a Skarn ship. It was not a Concord ship either. It belonged to a species that most of the galaxy did not know existed, a species that had spent its short history fighting wars against itself, before finally turning that same hard-won skill outward, into the dark between the stars. Its name, painted along its hull in a language none of the Concord species had ever seen, read simply, Reckoning. It was a human warship, built during a time when humanity had believed, wrongly or rightly, that the wider galaxy held more dangers than friends. The ship carried weapons meant for fights far larger and far worse than anything the Skarn Dominion had ever attempted. It carried a crew who had trained for years to use those weapons without hesitation, should the need ever arise. The Reckoning had been on a long patrol, mapping the empty reaches beyond human space, searching for threats before those threats could find humanity first. Its sensors, far more sensitive than anything the Concord or the Skarn possessed, had picked up the faint edge of the Kesh Reach distress signal, hours before the Skarn fleet had even entered weapons range. The signal was old, damaged by distance, barely a whisper by the time it reached the ship, but a whisper was enough. On the bridge of the Reckoning, Commander Sarah Reyes studied the signal data with a tired frown. She had been awake for 16 hours already, chasing a different sensor ghost across 2 systems before it turned out to be nothing more than a cluster of ice debris. Now this, a distress call from an alien station under attack by an unknown hostile force, 11 light days from the nearest known human outpost, in a region of space, the Reckoning's charts marked only as unexplored. Confidence on the translation? She asked her communications officer, a sharp young lieutenant named Marcus Webb. Hi, Commander. The signal used a standard distress format, close enough to universal math and physics markers that our systems built a rough translation fast. Whoever sent it, they're being attacked, right now. Numbers suggest they don't have long. Sarah looked at the star chart. The station, Kesh Reach, according to the translated data, was 4 hours away at the Reckoning's best sustainable speed. 4 hours was a long time for people under attack. It might already be too late by the time they arrived, but it might not be. She thought of the standing orders that had sent the Reckoning out here in the first place: protect human interests, gather intelligence on unknown threats, and use judgment when judgment was needed, because no set of orders written in advance could cover every situation a ship might find in the dark. This was one of those situations. Set course for the signal source, Sarah said. Best speed, quietly, until we know what we are dealing with. Aye, Commander, said her helmsman, already working the controls. Sarah settled into her command chair and felt the old, familiar tightness in her chest that came before action. She did not know who was sending that distress call, or who was attacking them, or what she would find when the Reckoning finally arrived. She only knew that somewhere ahead of her, people were fighting for their lives with no help in sight, and the Reckoning had both the ability and, in her mind, the duty to change that. Bring weapon systems to standby, she added. Full crew alert in 3 hours. I want everyone ready before we arrive, not after. Back at Kesh Reach, the situation had grown worse. The outer ring had lost pressure completely, and the Skarn ships had begun landing boarding craft on the hull, small dark shuttles that clamped onto the station's skin like insects and began cutting through with plasma torches. Sela watched the reports come in with a growing, cold fear that she fought to keep off her face for the sake of her crew. Boarders in Section 4, someone called out. Security teams are engaging, but they are not trained for this. We are losing ground. Fall back to the core, Sela ordered. Seal every door behind you. Slow them down however you can. She thought, in a distant part of her mind, of her family back on the Concord homeworld, of the message she had not had time to send them, of all the small things left undone, because nobody expected a morning like this one. She pushed the thoughts away. There was no room for them now. "Administrator," Tomo said suddenly, his voice different, confused rather than afraid. "I am picking up something new, a contact, approaching from outside the system. It came out of nowhere. I do not know how I missed it before. It is like it was not there, and then it was." Sella turned toward him. "Skarn reinforcements?" "No," Tomo said, staring at his screen. "The signature does not match anything in our database. It is not Concord. It is not Skarn. It is not anything I have ever seen." On the main screen, a new icon appeared, moving fast toward the besieged station from the direction of the void, from the empty dark that nobody in the Concord had ever mapped, the region where no ship had ever gone and returned with answers. Sella stared at it, her 4 eyes wide. For a moment, hope and fear mixed together inside her, because an unknown ship moving fast toward a battle could mean anything at all. It could be another enemy. It could be nothing that would help them. But some part of her, some old and stubborn part that had kept her fighting through this entire terrible day, allowed itself, just for a moment, to hope. "Whatever it is," she said quietly, "it is the only thing coming. Everyone, hold the line as long as you can. Help might be closer than we thought." Nobody on Kesh Reach knew what that ship truly was, or what it carried, or that the being who commanded it had already decided, 4 hours ago, that she would not let this station fall without a fight. Nobody expected a human warship to come out of the void. But one was coming now, and it was coming fast, and the Skarn Dominion had no idea what they were about to face. The battle for Kesh Reach was not over. It had only just begun. No rescue was coming. Nobody expected a human dangerous warship to emerge from the void. Aboard the Reckoning, the final hour before arrival passed in a tense, practiced rhythm. Sarah Reyes walked the ship from bow to stern, checking on her crew the way she always did before a fight, not because she doubted their readiness, but because she believed a commander should be seen. Faces looked calmer when they knew their captain was calm too, even when that calm was mostly built out of discipline and habit, rather than any real certainty about what lay ahead. In the weapons bay, Chief Gunner Dara Okafor was running final diagnostics on the main battery, a set of railguns that could punch through most known armor at this range, and a smaller array of missile tubes loaded with warheads that had never once been used outside of testing ranges. Dara looked up as Sarah entered. "Everything's green, Commander," she said. "Whatever's out there, we'll be ready." "Good," Sarah said. "Remember, we don't know their tech yet. Watch the first exchange closely. I want real data, not guesses, before we commit to a full engagement." Understood. Sarah moved on to the medical bay, where Dr. Priya Anand was preparing trauma stations, just in case boarding or serious hull damage brought casualties. Priya looked tired but steady, the kind of tired that came from years of training rather than fear. "We'll be ready for whatever comes back," Priya said simply, and Sarah nodded, trusting her the way she trusted every member of this crew, hand-picked and battle-tested across 2 years of long, quiet patrols that had, until now, never actually needed all this preparation. Back on the bridge, Marcus Webb had been working non-stop on the translated data from the distress signal, trying to build a clearer picture of who was under attack and who was attacking them. "Commander, I've got more detail now," he said as Sarah returned to her chair. "The station belongs to something called the Voss Concord, some kind of alliance of species. Looks like it covers a fair bit of territory, judging by the language markers in their systems. The attacking force identifies itself, or is identified in the station's own records, as the Skarn Dominion. Raiders, best guess. Not a formal state actor. Hit-and-run tactics. No history of negotiation. Numbers? Distress call. Mentioned 12 warships against the station's minimal defenses. That call is 4 hours old now. No telling what the situation looks like by the time we arrive." Sarah's jaw tightened. 4 hours was a long time for a defenseless station to survive against 12 warships. She allowed herself a moment to consider that they might arrive too late, that there might be nothing left to save. Then she set the thought aside. There was no use dwelling on outcomes she could not yet know. There was only the plan, and the ship, and the crew who trusted her to lead them well. "Time to arrival?" she asked. 22 minutes, Commander. Full crew to battle stations in 15. I want the reckoning ready the moment we drop out of transit. The 22 minutes passed slowly, the way time always seemed to stretch before a fight. Sarah used the time to review what little the reckoning's sensors had gathered about Skarn's ship design from the long-range scan Tomo's distress signal had, by pure chance, carried a fragment of. The hull shapes were unfamiliar, angular and spiked, clearly built by beings who valued intimidation as much as function. Their weapon signatures suggested plasma-based cannons, powerful against light armor but likely to struggle against the reckoning's reinforced hull plating, developed after generations of humanity's own internal conflicts had taught hard lessons about what kind of ship could actually survive modern war. Commander, said her helmsman, a steady young man named Elias Kirkland, transit exit in 1 minute. Bring us in fast, Sarah said. I want to hit them before they know we're there. No hailing, no warning shots. If they're mid-attack on a defenseless station, they've already told us everything we need to know about their intentions. Aye, Commander. The reckoning shuddered gently as it dropped out of faster-than-light transit, the stars around it snapping back into their normal, unmoving positions. Ahead, the battle at Kesh Reach came into full view on the main screen, the station's outer ring torn open and venting atmosphere into space. Small Skarn boarding craft locked onto its hull like feeding insects, and the 12 Skarn warships arranged in a loose formation around the station, weapons still firing intermittently at the weak, failing point defense guns that continued to answer back despite everything. Sarah felt something cold and clear settle over her, the same feeling she always got in the last seconds before a fight began, when doubt fell away and only the task ahead remained. Target the 2 ships closest to the station's boarding craft first, she said. We cut off their ability to reinforce or retreat their people. Then we start working through the rest. Weapons locked, Dara reported from the weapons bay, railguns charged, missiles ready. Fire. The first shots from the reckoning crossed the distance between the ship and the nearest Skarn warship in less than 2 seconds. The railgun rounds struck the enemy vessel's hull with a force that the Skarn's armor, designed to stop plasma weapons and light kinetic fire, had never been built to withstand. The first ship's engine section tore open in a silent flash of released energy, venting atmosphere and debris in a wide, spreading cloud. It did not explode outright, but it went dark immediately, drifting now, powerless. A second later, a missile struck the boarding craft locked onto Kesh Reach's hull nearest that stricken warship. The small vessel came apart entirely, its debris scattering harmlessly against the station's already damaged plating. On the Skarn flagship, somewhere in the heart of the attacking fleet, confusion spread fast. The Skarn commander, a broad, heavily armored being named Grosk Vek, had led raids across a dozen systems without ever losing more than a single ship to any defender's counterattack. He had never seen a weapon punch clean through one of his warships in a single hit. Report, Grosk snarled into his command channel. What struck the Keltrish? Identify the attacker. Unknown contact, Commander, came the frightened reply. It appeared from the outer system. No warning, no hailing. Weapon's signature does not match anything in our records. Grosk turned his attention to the tactical display and saw the newcomer for the first time. A single vessel, smaller than his own flagship, but built along lines that suggested pure function, no ornamentation, no display of status the way Skarn ships were built to intimidate. Just a weapon, shaped like a ship. One vessel, Grosk said, something like contempt entering his voice even through his surprise. One vessel destroyed the Keltresh's engines in a single strike, and you tell me it appeared from nowhere. Bring all forward batteries to bear. Destroy it. 6 of the 12 Skarn warships began turning, their weapons swinging away from the wounded station toward this new and unexpected threat. Aboard the Reckoning, the tactical display lit up with new contacts as the Skarn fleet responded to the attack. Sarah watched the enemy ships turn toward her, 6 of them now breaking formation from the station to focus on the Reckoning instead. They're taking the bait, she said, something grim and satisfied in her voice. Good. Every ship pointed at us is a ship not shooting at that station. Evasive pattern Delta. Keep us moving. Keep us hard to hit. Dara, target their engines and weapon batteries, not their hulls. Disable them if we can, rather than destroy them outright. We don't need this fight to cost more lives than it has to on either side. Copy that, Commander, Dara said, already adjusting her targeting solutions. The Reckoning banked hard, its inertial dampeners straining to keep the crew from being crushed by the sudden maneuver, and the first volley of Skarn plasma fire streaked past where the ship had been, only a second before. The Reckoning's armor, thick and layered with materials developed across generations of humanity's harshest conflicts, could likely have shrugged off a direct hit or two, but Sarah preferred not to test that theory more than necessary. "Second target acquired," Dara called out. "Firing!" Another railgun volley crossed the gap and struck a second Skarn warship along its weapons deck. The impact tore through the ship's main battery, and secondary explosions rippled along its hull as ammunition stores caught fire. The ship began venting atmosphere in a dozen places, tumbling slowly out of formation, unable to fight any longer. "Two down," Marcus reported from communications. "Well, disabled, not destroyed. 4 more incoming, and the other 6 are turning back toward the station." "They're trying to split our attention," Sarah said. "Fine, let's make sure they regret it. Elias, bring us between the station and the returning ships. Dara, keep working the ones already engaging us. We hold this line." The Reckoning's engines flared as Elias pushed the ship into a new heading, cutting across the battlefield to place itself directly in the path of the 6 Skarn warships trying to return their attention to the wounded, defenseless station. It was a bold position, one that put the Reckoning between 2 separate groups of enemy fire, but Sarah had faith in her ship's armor and her crew's skill, faith built across years of hard training that had, until this very moment, never truly been tested in real combat. "Brace for impact," she said calmly. "This is about to get busy." On Kesh Reach, Administrator Sella Vorn watched the battle unfold on her station's remaining sensors with an expression that mixed disbelief and desperate, fragile hope. The single unknown ship had, in the space of a few short minutes, disabled 2 Skarn warships and was now moving to place itself directly between the remaining fleet and her people. "Whoever they are," she said quietly to Tomo, standing beside her at the sensor station, "I have never seen anything fight like that." "Should we hail them, Administrator?" Tomo asked. "Try to make contact?" Sella thought about it for only a moment. "Not yet," she said. "Let them finish what they started. We can thank them properly once we know we're still alive to do it." Above the station, the Reckoning's guns fired again, and the battle for Kesh Reach entered its second, far more desperate phase, one that neither the Skarn Dominion nor the Voss Concord had ever expected, and one that would end with a single truth burned into the memory of every survivor. Nobody had known what waited in the void, and now, at last, they were finding out. No rescue was coming. Nobody expected a human dangerous warship to emerge from the void. The Reckoning shook hard as 3 Skarn warships opened fire at once, their plasma cannons converging on the human ship from different angles. The bridge lights flickered for a moment before the backup system steadied them. Sarah gripped the arms of her command chair and kept her eyes on the tactical display, watching the shapes of enemy fire wash over her ship's shields like waves against a rock. "Shields at 82%, reported her systems officer, a calm, precise woman named Ingrid Solberg. "Holding well, Commander. Their weapons are strong, but not strong enough to trouble us yet." "Keep me posted the moment that changes," Sarah said. "Dara, status on the engaging ships?" "Third target locked," Dara answered from the weapons bay, her voice tight with concentration. "Firing now." Another railgun round crossed the gap between the Reckoning and the nearest Skarn warship, striking it along the same weak point in its hull that had proven so vulnerable already. The joint between the main body and the engine section, a design flaw that Dara had noticed within the first exchange and had been targeting ever since. The Skarn ship's engines flared bright, then died entirely, leaving the vessel drifting and powerless, just like the 2 before it. 3 disabled, Marcus reported. 9 still active. 6 of them are closing on the station again, 3 still engaging us directly. Sarah studied the display. The 6 ships heading back toward Kesh Reach worried her more than the 3 still shooting at the Reckoning. Her own ship could take a beating and keep fighting. The station could not. "Elias, close the distance to those 6, she ordered. "I want to put ourselves in their firing line before they reach the station." "Aye, Commander, but that puts us in range of all 9 ships at once." "I know," Sarah said. Do it anyway. The Reckoning can take it. That station cannot. The ship's engines roared as Elias pushed them harder, cutting a fast arc across the battlefield. Sarah watched her crew work with the calm efficiency that came from years of drills, every station reporting clearly, every system responding the way it had been trained to respond. She felt a quiet, fierce pride in them even as the ship rocked under another volley of enemy fire. On the Skarn flagship, Groskvek watched his tactical display with a growing, uncomfortable feeling that he did not often experience: doubt. 3 of his warships were already disabled, tumbling uselessly through space, their crews trapped and helpless. The single enemy vessel had positioned itself directly between his remaining fleet and the station, absorbing fire from 3 ships at once without appearing to suffer any serious damage. "Status on that ship's shields," he demanded. "Still above 80%, Commander," came the reply, hesitant, as if the officer delivering the news feared what Grosk might do in response to it. "Our weapons are not penetrating." Grosk slammed a heavy fist against his console. In all his years raiding weak, undefended colonies across a dozen systems, he had never faced anything like this. The Skarn Dominion did not build ships for prolonged, difficult battles. They built ships for quick, brutal raids against targets too weak to fight back. This single vessel was rewriting every assumption he had walked into this fight with. "Concentrate all remaining ships on it," he ordered. "All 9. Overwhelm its shields with combined fire. It cannot withstand everything we have at once." The order went out, and the 6 ships that had been turning back toward the station instead reversed course again, joining the 3 already engaging the Reckoning. 9 Skarn warships converged their fire on a single human vessel, plasma bolts streaking across the black in a storm that lit up the battlefield like a false sunrise. Aboard the Reckoning, the bridge shook violently as the combined fire of 9 warships began to test the limits of even the ship's powerful shields. "Shields at 55% and falling fast," Ingrid reported, her calm voice tightening under the pressure. "Commander, if they keep this rate of fire, we'll lose shields within 4 minutes." Sarah's mind worked fast, weighing options. 9 ships firing together was a serious threat, more serious than she had expected from what had, until now, looked like a fairly disorganized raiding force. But 9 ships firing together also meant 9 ships committed to a single tactic, predictable and, in its own way, an opportunity. "Dara," she said, "how many of their forward batteries have we already identified as vulnerable?" "All of them share that same weak point at the engine hull joint, Commander. Consistent design flaw across every ship we've engaged so far." "Then let's use it. Elias, bring us through the center of their formation. Close range, fast pass. Dara, target engines on as many ships as you can hit during the pass. We're not going to outshield 9 ships forever, so let's take away their ability to keep this fight going." "That's a dangerous maneuver at this range, Commander," Elias said, though he was already adjusting the ship's heading. "I know," Sarah said. "Do it anyway." The Reckoning surged forward, cutting directly into the loose formation of Skarn warships, rather than away from it, closing the distance in a bold, aggressive move that none of the Skarn commanders had anticipated. As the human ship passed close by the nearest enemy vessels, its railguns fired in rapid succession, each round finding the same vulnerable joint that had already proven so costly to the Skarn fleet. One ship's engines exploded outright, the vessel tearing itself apart in a bright, silent flash. 2 more went dark, disabled like the ships before them. A 4th took a glancing hit that damaged its weapons array, but left its engines intact, and it peeled away from the formation entirely, retreating rather than risk further damage. By the time the Reckoning cleared the far side of the Skarn formation, only 5 ships remained combat-capable, and the coordinated fire that had been eating away at the human ship's shields fell apart entirely as the surviving Skarn vessels scattered to avoid the same fate as their companions. "Shields at 41%, Ingrid reported, but holding steady now. No more sustained fire." "Enemy status?" Sarah asked. 5 ships still combat-capable, Commander," Marcus said, "but they're breaking formation. I think they might be considering retreat." Sarah allowed herself a small, tight smile. "Good. Let's help them make that decision. Dara, target the flagship directly. Let's see if their commander is as brave without 8 other ships backing him up." On the Skarn flagship, Groskvek stared at his tactical display in something close to shock. 4 ships destroyed or disabled in a single pass. His fleet, which had entered this system expecting an easy raid against a defenseless trading station, was being systematically dismantled by a single enemy vessel that fought with a precision and aggression the Skarn had never encountered before. "Commander," his weapons officer said, voice trembling, "the enemy ship is turning toward us directly." Grosk felt something he had rarely felt in his long career as a raider: real fear. He had built his reputation on overwhelming weaker targets, on striking fast and hard against those who could not fight back. He had never learned how to fight an enemy that fought back harder than he did. "All remaining ships," he said, forcing steadiness into his voice that he did not entirely feel. "Concentrate fire on the flagship's position. We finish this now, before it finishes us." But even as he gave the order, he could see on his own display that his remaining captains were hesitating, their ships slowing rather than closing in for a coordinated final strike. They had seen what happened to the ships that had tried that already. Fear, once it took hold among a raiding fleet built more on intimidation than genuine discipline, spread fast. "Commander," his weapons officer said again, quieter this time, "2 ships are breaking off. They're retreating toward the transit point." Grosk's grip tightened on his console. His fleet, which had numbered 12 warships only minutes before, was falling apart around him, and the single vessel responsible for it all was closing the distance to his own flagship with a speed and confidence that made his chest tight with something he refused to name. On the Reckoning's bridge, Sarah watched the Skarn formation crumble with a grim, focused satisfaction, but she did not relax. A wounded, desperate enemy could still be dangerous, and she had not brought her crew this far to lose anyone now, not when victory was so clearly within reach. "Steady," she said, more to herself than to her crew. "We finish this the right way. No more losses, on either side, than we have to take." Ahead of her, the Skarn flagship loomed larger on the main screen, and somewhere aboard it, its commander was learning, far too late, exactly what kind of enemy had emerged from the void. No rescue was coming. Nobody expected a human dangerous warship to emerge from the void. The Reckoning closed the final distance to the Skarn flagship with steady, deliberate speed. Sarah Reyes watched the enemy vessel grow on her main screen, larger and more heavily armored than the warships already destroyed or disabled, clearly built to be the anchor of the raiding fleet rather than one of its expendable arms. "Commander," Ingrid reported, "flagship shields are stronger than the others we've faced. Early scans suggest reinforced plating around the command sections." "Makes sense," Sarah said. "No raider puts his best armor on a ship he expects to lose. Dara, what's our status?" "Railguns fully charged, Commander. Missile reserves at 60%. We can still fight hard if we need to." "Good. Let's see if we can end this without needing all of it." Sarah opened a channel, gesturing to Marcus. "Try to establish contact with the flagship. Use whatever translation protocols we can build from the station's distress signal data. Let's see if they understand plain language before we escalate further." Marcus worked quickly, adapting the rough translation matrix he had built from the Kesh Reach distress call. It was imperfect, built from fragments rather than any real linguistic study, but within a minute he had something usable. "Channel open, Commander. No guarantee they'll understand more than the basic structure, but it should get the core message across." Sarah straightened in her chair and spoke clearly, her voice steady and even. "Skarn vessel, this is Commander Sarah Reyes of the human warship Reckoning. Your fleet has suffered heavy losses. Surrender now, withdraw from this system, and no further ships will be harmed. Continue this attack, and I will finish what I started." There was a long pause. On the Skarn flagship, Groskvek stared at the translated message scrolling across his own console, his broad shoulders tight with a mixture of rage and fear he had never before felt in equal measure. "They demand surrender," his communications officer said, disbelief plain in his voice. "From us." Grosk's first instinct, built from years of dominance over weaker targets, was to refuse outright, to order every remaining ship into a final, desperate assault. But some cold, calculating part of his mind, the part that had kept him alive through a dozen years of raiding, forced him to look again at the tactical display. 7 ships destroyed or disabled out of 12, 2 more fleeing toward the transit point, and only 3 ships remaining under his direct command, including his own flagship, against a single enemy vessel that had, so far, dismantled every attempt to stop it. Options, he said quietly to his second-in-command, a scarred veteran named Ersk, who had served with him since his earliest raids. Ersk did not answer immediately. When he did, his voice was low, careful. "Commander, I do not believe we can win this fight. If we continue, we lose the flagship too, and everyone aboard it. If we withdraw now, we keep what remains of the fleet." Grosk's fists clenched at his sides. Surrender was not a word the Skarn Dominion used easily. Raiders who surrendered lost standing, lost the fear that kept weaker enemies from resisting in the first place. But a dead raider commanded nothing at all. "Signal the enemy vessel," he said finally, each word forced out through gritted teeth. Tell them we withdraw." Aboard the Reckoning, Marcus's console chimed with an incoming response. "Commander, they're answering. Translation is rough, but I believe they're agreeing to withdraw." Sarah allowed herself a slow breath. "Confirm their heading. Make sure they're actually retreating and not repositioning for another attack." "Tracking now," Ingrid said. A moment passed. "Confirmed, Commander. All 3 remaining combat-capable ships are turning toward the transit point, matching the heading of the 2 that fled earlier. They're leaving the system." A quiet ripple of relief moved through the bridge crew, though nobody relaxed entirely. Not yet. Sarah kept her eyes on the tactical display until she was certain the retreat was genuine, watching the 5 remaining Skarn ships gather speed and vanish, one by one, into transit, leaving behind 7 wrecked or drifting hulks, scattered around the battered but still standing station. "They're gone, Commander," Marcus confirmed at last. "All contacts clear." Only then did Sarah let herself relax, just slightly, sinking back into her command chair as the tension of the past 20 minutes began to drain out of her shoulders. "Good work, all of you," she said, loud enough for the whole bridge to hear. "Damage report." "Shields at 38%, still recovering," Ingrid said. "Minor hull scoring along the port side from near misses, nothing structural. We came through this in far better shape than I expected, honestly." "Casualties?" "None, Commander. Not one injury reported anywhere aboard." Sarah closed her eyes for a brief moment, quiet gratitude passing through her before she opened them again, already moving on to the next task. A commander did not have the luxury of dwelling too long on relief, not while there was still work to be done. "Bring us alongside the station," she said. "Let's see what we can do to help them, and let's find out exactly who we just fought a war for." On Kesh Reach, the mood aboard the battered station had shifted from desperate survival to stunned, disbelieving relief. Administrator Sella Vorn stood on the command deck, watching the last Skarn contacts vanish from her sensors, her 4 eyes fixed on the screen, as if she still expected the danger to return at any moment. "They're really gone," Tomo said quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. I truly did not think we would still be here to see this." Sella allowed herself a long, shaking breath, the first real breath she had taken, it felt like, in hours. Around her, the command deck crew began to react in their own ways, some sagging with relief, some beginning quiet, disbelieving laughter, a few simply sitting down where they stood, as if their legs could no longer hold the weight of what had just happened. "The unknown vessel," Sella said, forcing her voice back into something steady and authoritative. "Status?" "Moving toward us now, Administrator," Tomo said, checking his readings. "No hostile indicators. They're approaching slowly, deliberately. I do not think they mean us harm." Sella watched the ship grow larger on her screen, the same vessel that had, in the span of 20 minutes, done more damage to a full Skarn raiding fleet than the entire Voss Concord military had managed in years of border skirmishes with the Dominion. She thought of every report she had ever read about the Skarn, every warning about their strength, their ruthlessness, their unbeatable reputation among the smaller, weaker colonies along the Concord's edge. None of it had mattered against this single ship. "Open a channel," she said. "If they're willing to talk, I want to know who they are, and I want to thank them properly for what they just did for my people." Tomo worked quickly, adapting what little translation data the station's systems had already gathered from the brief, rough exchange between the two ships during the battle. It took a few minutes, but eventually a connection opened. The Reckoning systems and Kesh Reach's systems, slowly, imperfectly, beginning to understand each other. On the Reckoning's bridge, Marcus turned to Sarah. "Commander, incoming hail from the station. They want to talk." Sarah straightened in her chair, smoothing down the front of her uniform in an old automatic habit before any formal contact, even one built on rough translation and uncertain understanding. "Put them through," she said. "Let's find out who we just went to war for." The screen flickered, resolving into a rough, imperfect image of Sella Vorn standing on the command deck of Kesh Reach, her four eyes wide with a mixture of exhaustion, disbelief, and something that, even across the barrier of species and language, looked unmistakably like gratitude. "This is Administrator Sella Vorn of Kesh Reach Station," she said, her words rendered choppy and uncertain by the rough translation matrix, but clear enough in their meaning. "I do not know who you are, or where you came from, but you saved my station, and everyone aboard it today. On behalf of my people, and on behalf of the Voss Concord, I thank you." Sarah felt something warm settle in her chest, a feeling she had not expected to carry away from what had, only an hour ago, looked like it might become a very different, much darker outcome. "This is Commander Sarah Reyes of the human warship Reckoning," she said, choosing her words carefully, aware that every syllable would be shaping whatever came next between two peoples who, until today, had not known the other existed. "We heard your distress call and came as fast as we could. I'm glad we made it in time. I'm sorry it wasn't sooner." Sella shook her head slowly, a gesture that the translation matrix, somehow, managed to convey clearly enough across the screen. "You came at all," she said. "That is more than we had any right to expect from strangers, so far from anything either of us understands. Please, Commander, would your ship be willing to dock? I believe we have a great deal to discuss, and my people would very much like the chance to properly meet the ones who saved them." Sarah glanced around her bridge, at the tired, steady faces of her crew, at Marcus and Ingrid, and Elias and Dara, all of them watching her with quiet anticipation, waiting to see what came next in a story none of them could have predicted when they left human space so many months ago. "We'd be glad to," Sarah said. "Let's talk." No rescue was coming. Nobody expected a human dangerous warship to emerge from the void. The Reckoning docked with Kesh Reach 2 hours later, once the station's damaged docking systems had been patched together enough to safely receive a ship of its size. Sarah Reyes led a small landing party through the connecting corridor. Herself, Marcus for communications, Dara, in case any security concerns arose, and Dr. Priya Anand, who had insisted on coming along in case any of the station's wounded needed additional medical help beyond what the Concord's own doctors could provide. The corridor smelled of scorched metal and recycled air, the scars of the battle still fresh and visible in the buckled walls and flickering lights along the route. Sarah studied it all quietly as she walked, understanding for the first time, in a way that sensor readings alone could not convey, exactly how close this station had come to falling entirely. Sella Vorn met them at the end of the corridor, flanked by Tomo and a handful of other station officials, all of them watching the arriving humans with open, undisguised curiosity. It was, Sarah realized, likely the first time any of them had ever seen a human being in person, and she found herself very aware of how strange she and her crew must look to eyes built so differently from her own. "Commander Reyes," Sella said, stepping forward and extending a hand in a gesture that Marcus's earlier communications had apparently conveyed as an appropriate human greeting. "Welcome to Kesh Reach. I confess, I did not expect to be alive to say those words today." Sarah shook the offered hand carefully, mindful of the physical differences between them. "Administrator Vorn, thank you for the welcome. I'm only sorry we couldn't get here sooner." "You got here," Sella said simply. "That is what matters. Please come. There is much to discuss, and my people are eager to properly meet the ones who saved us." They spoke for hours in the station's largest remaining meeting room, one of the few spaces that had survived the battle without serious damage. Sella asked question after question, her curiosity plain and unhidden. Where had the humans come from? How had a single ship managed to defeat a force that had, in previous encounters recorded by the wider Concord, taken entire fleets to repel? And why had humanity, apparently a species with such formidable capability, remained unknown to the rest of the galaxy until now. Sarah answered as honestly as she could, careful not to reveal more about human military capability than seemed wise for a first contact with a species whose intentions, while apparently friendly, were still largely unknown to her. She spoke of Earth, of humanity's long and difficult history of conflict among themselves before finally turning their attention outward to the stars, of the caution that had led human exploration ships to stay quiet and unseen while they gathered information about the wider galaxy before announcing themselves. "We did not know what waited beyond our own space," Sarah explained. "History taught us to be careful before making ourselves known to potential threats we did not yet understand. The Reckoning was on a long patrol, mapping unclaimed space and watching for danger, when we picked up your distress call. We almost didn't catch it at all. If we had been a few systems further away, or moving in a different direction, this outcome might have looked very different." Sella's 4 eyes studied her carefully. "Then it seems we owe a great deal to simple chance," she said, "and to your decision to act on what chance provided." "Some things are worth acting on," Sarah said, "chance or not." Tomo, who had been quiet through most of the conversation, finally spoke up. "Commander, if I may ask, the Skarn Dominion has raided colonies along our border for years. The Concord military has never managed to stop them entirely, only slow them down. Your ship defeated 12 of their warships in under half an hour. How is that possible?" Sarah considered her answer carefully. "Different history," she said finally. "Different lessons learned the hard way. I won't pretend our weapons and tactics came without cost. Humanity fought its own wars for a long time, before we ever looked outward. We built what we built because we needed it, not because we wanted a fight with anyone out here. But I'll be honest with you, Administrator. If the Skarn Dominion, or anyone else, threatens the people we choose to stand beside, we won't hesitate to answer that threat the same way we answered it today." A quiet, thoughtful silence settled over the room at that. Sella nodded slowly. "I think," she said, "that the Concord will be very interested in speaking further with your people. Not as a threat, Commander. As potential friends, if you are willing." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "I think my people would like that too." Over the following days, word of the battle at Kesh Reach spread quickly through Voss Concord space, carried along trade routes and communication relays until it reached the ears of Concord Military Command far closer to the Alliance's core worlds. A single unknown vessel, belonging to a previously unheard-of species, had single-handedly defeated a Skarn raiding fleet that outnumbered it 12 to 1, without losing a single crew member in the process. The story grew a little larger with each retelling, as stories often do, but even the most conservative, careful versions of events left Concord military analysts deeply unsettled and deeply curious in equal measure. A formal Concord delegation was dispatched to Kesh Reach within the week, eager to establish official contact with this new species that had appeared, seemingly from nowhere, at exactly the moment a defenseless station needed saving most. Sarah remained at the station to help facilitate those early conversations, sending regular reports back toward human space, through the Reckoning's long-range communication systems, careful and measured reports that emphasized caution and careful diplomacy over any hint of triumph or aggression. Groskvek, for his part, returned to Skarn Dominion territory with the shattered remains of his once proud raiding fleet, carrying with him a warning that would spread through Skarn ranks far faster and far more effectively than any Concord military victory ever had. Somewhere beyond the edge of known space, in the region the Concord called the Void, there existed a species capable of dismantling a Skarn fleet without any apparent difficulty at all. It was a warning that would, in the months and years that followed, do more to discourage further Skarn raids along that stretch of the Concord border than a decade of failed Concord military campaigns ever had. Aboard Kesh Reach, life slowly began returning to something like normal, even as the station bore the visible scars of the battle that had so nearly ended it. Sella Vorn found herself, in quiet moments between the ongoing diplomatic discussions, grateful in a way she struggled to fully put into words, not just for her survival and the survival of her people, but for the strange, unexpected friendship that seemed to be forming between two species who, only weeks earlier, had not even known the other existed. On the day the Reckoning finally prepared to depart, returning toward human space to deliver its full report, and to guide the first official human diplomatic mission back toward Concord territory, Sella came to see Sarah off personally, standing at the docking corridor with Tomo and a small gathering of station staff who had, over the past days, come to know the human crew reasonably well. "I hope this is not goodbye, Commander," Sella said. "I hope it is only the beginning." Sarah looked back at the station, at the people who, only a short time ago, had been strangers facing certain destruction with no rescue in sight, and who now stood here, alive and hopeful, thanks to a distress call that had, by pure chance, reached exactly the right ears, at exactly the right moment. "It's only the beginning," Sarah agreed. "You have my word on that." She turned and walked back aboard the Reckoning, and within the hour, the ship pulled away from Kesh Reach, its engines flaring bright against the dark backdrop of space as it set course back toward the edge of known human territory, carrying with it the first real proof that humanity was no longer alone among the stars, and that the void, once thought empty and lifeless, held far more than anyone in the wider galaxy had ever imagined. Behind it, Kesh Reach continued its slow recovery, its people forever changed by the day a human warship emerged from the darkness, when no rescue should have been possible, and by the quiet, steady truth that had followed in that ship's wake. Sometimes, against every expectation, help arrives exactly when it is needed most. The story of Kesh Reach would be told for years afterward across Voss Concord space, growing and changing with each retelling, but at its heart, it would always carry the same simple truth that Sella Vorn had witnessed with her own 4 eyes. Nobody had expected rescue that day. Nobody had known what waited beyond the edge of the map, and yet, out of the void, help had come anyway, dangerous and unannounced, and exactly enough to change everything.